And for a while, I actually had the pen in my hand as acting governor, as you heard. Throughout that experience, in all of my years in and around government, I cannot think of anything that is more threatening and more dangerous than the underfunded nature of our pensions across the country. Now, you might think that that's an alarmist statement, but it's absolutely true. Pension costs across this country in every single one of your states are unsustainable. The unfunded liability of states across the country are somewhere between 1.5 and $3 trillion. Understand that what that means is that your constituents, your households are already bearing the cost of this debt. And you need to know that regardless of what your political party is and what your persuasion is. For example, looking at some notes here, Jacksonville, Florida, the average household has a $29,000 debt because of the pension obligations of the state and the municipalities. Baltimore, Maryland, $41,000. Boston, Massachusetts, families are shouldering $58,000. Chicago, $75,000 is what households that are already struggling with the economy have got to bear because of the upside-down nature of pension funding in the country today. It's not just a state problem either. Those of you who are representatives of major cities have a very serious issue that needs to be addressed in the very near future. In New York City, pension contributions have reached $8.5 billion per year. This is up from 1.5 just 10 years ago. In Los Angeles, the total cost of workers' compensation and benefits and so on is now 85% of the city's budget. Now think about that. That only leaves 15% for every other function of local government. In Chicago, the underfunded pension obligation amounts to $45 billion. In Pittsburgh, they are at 30% funded. They are 70% underfunded. And a little town in Rhode Island, Central Falls, Rhode Island, made news earlier this year because that tiny city, about the size of Altoona, Curtis Thomas, you'll know what I'm talking about, had an $80 million pension liability, and it was crumbling. It was facing bankruptcy. Something had to be done. Here's the good news. Because of people like Senator Dan Liljenquist in Utah, Gina Raimondo, and the leadership up in Rhode Island, people have stepped up and taken dramatic, statesmanlike actions to address this. The most recent example of that is Rhode Island, and I take a minute to share that with you. The sweeping changes, including curtailing some pension increases, raising retirement ages, and what Dan was just telling you about, mixing a defined benefit and a defined contribution plans to reduce cost without jeopardizing the long-term viability of benefits for workers. This is a quote from the Senate President. "It would certainly be a lot easier to walk away from this reform. However, it is clear that doing nothing only puts our retirees and our active members' benefits at greater risks. We owe it to them as well as to all other taxpayers to attack this challenge head on. Unless states rein in pension costs, legislators across this country, you are going to be forced to raise taxes or to slash funding for education and other services." I really do view this as a lifelong D, as a fairness issue, because without some dramatic action, you are putting existing retirees and active workers at risk because there's not enough money to pay for all of it. It is a fairness issue, and I want especially to send that message to my good friend Jim Testerman, who has been on the front line in education policies. I view this as a pro-teacher initiative and a pro-worker initiative, because you're assuring that there will be money to keep teachers in the classroom and to pay their retirement benefits. If we don't take action, that is all at risk. Still, even with the notion that it is a fair thing to do, this is going to be tough. I've been where you are. I know what you're talking about. I know tough votes when I see them. This was a tough vote for people in Rhode Island. It's going to be a tough vote for you in your legislature. Pension reform is hard, but if it doesn't happen, you will face calamity in your states. Some other states have already stepped up in addition to Utah and Rhode Island. Georgia, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Oregon, Washington, Pennsylvania did a few corrective things about 2 years ago. The message that I want to send is real simple, and that's this: you are not alone. Every state in this nation shares the gargantuan problem. Every state is going to have to take some kind of corrective action. And you're not alone in this sense. On a political note, the Laura and John Arnold Foundation, with which I'm associated now, has really stepped up and gone all over this country seeking statesmen and looking for people with the courage to stand up and say, you know what, let's do the right thing. To the extent that we can encourage that behavior and help you individually or collectively as a state, we're there to make sure that happens. So make sure that you pick up a copy of the brochure in the back, and if you want to get the pension reform paper online, it is www.arnoldfoundation.org. Utah's done it, Rhode Island has done it, most other states are at least looking at it, and I can't stress enough how important this action is for you to take. It's not going to be easy. It's not, as Dan says, it's not very palatable, but it's the right thing to do. And by all means, we encourage you to step up and do the right thing. Thank you very much.